Right, in this section, we're going to talk about how to create and manage users within Hyku. All of that is available under the tasks section of the administrative dashboard. You can see we have manage users and manage groups here as sections. And so 3 terms to keep in mind are users versus groups versus roles. These all interrelate but are independent concepts within the management of that. And so you can see there are several groups that come loaded by default, editors, depositors, repository administrators. Each of those groups has specific roles for the functions that they can do within the system. So administrators can do everything. Editors can edit. You can see the description there. They can edit and read collections and works. They can also create collections. They can deposit and approve works. They can manage embargoes and leases, and they can manage importers. And once we add the functionality for exporters, they'll be able to manage those as well. There are also groups for depositors who can then deposit works and see collections within the system. So you can also, if you would like, this is a bit of an advanced function, but you can create a new group. And first you have to initially create it, at the very least give it a name, ideally give it a bit of a description as well. And then once you have created it, you can customize which of these roles, such as a tenant reader, tenant manager, collection reader, etc. you would want to give that role, or give that anyone who is in that group in your system. You can also, once you have a group already in place, these are the users who are part of this group, editors. You can see there's a test account that I've used, and then one student worker. I could add a new user to be an editor, and they would have all the roles associated with that. And so that would mean that they have this collection editor, user, reader, work, editor, role, and you can manage all of that under groups. In the manage user section, and wait a moment for this to load. But when you manage users, you can bring them in to a group at the time that you add them. So you add them through their email address, and you can add them as an admin, a collection manager down the line. And so you can see here, technically there are 74 users in this repository, but most of them only have the registered user role and the public role. Public is what someone gets brought in as automatically if they do not have any other role or group that they are assigned to. And so for that reason, even though they could navigate to this auarchives.hykucommons.org, they could log in. Once they did that, they would only be able to see their activity. And possibly that's it, because they do not have permissions that go along with those other groups. So they would not be able to deposit a work, would not be able to see collections other than the public collections that they could see when they were not logged in, etc. So that covers bringing in users, associating them with groups, and then the roles that can be, or that by default are assigned to groups, and then how you can customize roles for groups if you would like. So if we have any questions on that, we can answer them now.
Hi, this is Sherry. I was trying to type my question, but I think it's better to ask it. So when you invite a user, do you have to select a role? I was assuming you put them in a group first. So
yes, I'm glad you asked that, because I should mention that this drop down that says select a role is a little misleading. You are in fact selecting a group.
Thank you.
And you do not have to add them to any group. So I could invite a user through their email address. If I don't use this drop down, it will bring them in as a public user, registered user, and they won't have any permissions. Or I can add them to a group. There is also the option to assign specific roles to a user outside of a group. But that's sort of a relic of how the system functioned before we had this group's functionality. So in the workflow role section, which is under configuration, you can choose a group and assign a workflow role or assign a role to a user. But all of that's handled much more neatly under managing groups, managing users. But yeah, I'm glad you asked, because that is a misleading description there.
So what would be the group for like a faculty member that is just going to log in and upload their own works and files? Just sort of simple like that.
Yeah, that depositors. And almost all of your non-admin users, I think depositors is probably the most common group that you're going to use, because that gives you the ability to deposit works and to see collections. And that's it.
Sorry, can I jump in for a second?
Please.
Nick, I just want to point out actually that in managed users, those are actually roles. If you look at them, you're assigning a role specifically to a collection manager, a user manager, or a work editor, collection editor. In the groups, actually, we just have editor, which allows you to edit collection and work, for example, or admin, which allows you to edit the tenant and edit the collection and edit the users. So I still actually think the safest way to do it is to not assign a role when you add a user and then add them to the group. If you pick a role there, you may be picking them, you won't be automatically adding them to those groups. So if you try to do something with one of those groups later on, the editors or the depositors, they won't be included in that group. And you will be giving them the rights to say edit collections, but not to edit works or something like that. It is very confusing because a lot of the terminology is used simultaneously, you know, editor, depositor, reader, etc. The roles are very discrete. So you have work depositor, work editor, collection manager, collection editor, collection reader, user reader, user manager, or something like that. So the roles apply to just one specific function, whereas the groups bundle those roles together. So the groups are usually a better choice for that. The other thing with groups, you can actually create your own groups. So if you wanted to create a group that was like science faculty, then later on when you create collections or admin sets, you can add just the science faculty versus the humanities faculty. Even though the science and humanity faculty may be able to kind of do the same things, that's a way that you can split them into different kind of collections or admin based permissions. So sorry to, as you can see, this is a evolving thing, something we've added in the last couple of months, and it's still we're still kind of ourselves working out all of the nuances of it. One of the things we'll do in the next advanced training sessions is spend a section going in more depth about creating collections, admin sets, and managing the permissions that go along with them. But for now, the safest thing to do is to add them with no role and then add them to a group later.
Yes, thank you. That is very helpful.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording to close out this section.